May the divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Today our topic is discernment. In Sanskrit it's called viveka. It's the first of the four practices. These are four basic practices in Vedanta. In Sanskrit again, that's called sadhana chatushtaya. Last month we saw a little bit about spiritual fitness. So how to make us fit Vedanta students. And so there are these four practices that are given, and discernment of viveka is the first of those practices. We know oftentimes that good intentions and good desires are themselves not enough unless we have acquired fitness also to fulfill that desire, to fulfill those aspirations. For instance, running a marathon is a great idea and one would want to do it. And one may have good intention about doing it, but if we have to actually start running and complete the marathon, then we must start practicing and make ourselves fit enough to run those 26 miles. In the same way, even when we read Vedanta books, read the lives of these great saints and mystics, and are inspired by their life, we would like to experience what they experienced. We would like to be somehow like them in some way. Then the first thing we need is to become fit. And to that fitness, discernment is always the first part of that journey. Now, discernment is not something new to any of us. One way or the other, we are practicing discernment in our lives all the time. Discernment primarily means looking at things before us and making a choice. And our discernment can begin with as simple a thing as, what shall I have for breakfast this morning? If you have a different kinds of cereals, like which one shall I have? Or shall I have tea or coffee? And we make these decisions. We don't think about it like some big discernment occurring there. But we are looking at the scene. We're looking at the choices available. And somehow we choose one thing over another. Oftentimes it's become so much a part of our life, we don't even think we are like practicing anything. But discernment or viveka is something that we do all the time. But discernment as a Vedanta practice is not simply looking and making decisions. It's looking deeply, looking carefully before making any decisions. Because even in our day-to-day lives, we see that we do make choices, but sometimes we don't consider the options deeply enough. We don't look carefully enough. And yes, there are certain times in life when there is no time to look carefully and wait and decide and weigh the pros and cons. There are some times in life we need to take very immediate decisions. Like if you have a mosquito on your this thing, you don't like, what shall I do? There's no time for it. You have to instantly just do it. So yes, there are times in life we need split-second decisions. But most of the time, we do have some time before taking a decision. And in general, we may have seen that the times in which we are too hasty or too much in a rush, we tend to make more mistakes. We tend to make choices that we regret later. So it's a helpful practice to pause, to look deeply, consider all the options, and choose the best that is available. We still will make mistakes. It's not as if we are going to get everything right all the time. but we might make fewer mistakes if we look at things deeply and decide carefully. So that is the practice. And when this becomes a habit, when this becomes such an ingrained habit that we learn to be very careful with the decisions we make in life, then we see that we begin to see things we may have missed before. A simple example, as you looking at the tree on the on the charts right here, you can just see from the window, you get to see a tree. If you have fairly good eyes, you can see the tree. But if I go a bit closer and look at it carefully, then I might be able to see the branches. I might be able to see the structure of the stem. I might be able to see the leaves. If I go still closer and look at it even more carefully, I might be able to see perhaps a few ants on it. The idea is the more carefully I look, the more closer I go, I notice things that I may not have noticed from a distance. Now, when this becomes a habit, we, as I said, begin to see things we may have missed before. And that's the whole point in Vedanta. Because there are a lot of things in our life, no matter how sometimes we may pride ourselves in being very rational, logical beings, there are a lot of things in our life, we just take them for granted. We kind of assume they are the way they are. But when we begin to look deeply and carefully, we begin to ask questions which we may not have asked before. You look at an object like this and say, well, what is it? Well, you can give it a name and you say this is a solid object as opposed to a liquid, as opposed to something gaseous. But again, if you look at it more carefully, maybe if you get a microscope and look at everything around us, we might see that with a powerful microscope, all these are tiny particles of matter, nothing more than that. And if you go further deep, just as maybe atoms, or maybe electrons, protons, neutrons, and many other basic particles now modern science is discovering. So we begin to see that. Similarly, we can then begin to look inside us and ask, who is this me? Who is this person who is seeing this world? If everything is just atoms and molecules, then why is one object called by one name and some other object called by different name? Simply by the different functions that they serve in life. So similarly, we might look at, say, a friend of mine comes to meet me, and then a question we may never have asked before, we said, who is this person really? What I'm seeing before me is just a human body, assuming that friend is a human being. It could be a dog, a cat, that's fine. So if it's a human friend, I'm seeing a human body. And again, the human body, we know its chemical composition, we know its atoms and molecules. But is my friend nothing but atoms and molecules in a certain configuration? Then we know, well, there is something more in my friend than just that. There is the mind, there are emotions, there are feelings, there are memories. And well, same thing is true with regard to us. Beyond the body, we have these things. So we see these layers within us, we see these layers in the outside of us, and our way of looking at the world changes. And then we begin to ask, maybe some of us may never have asked, what is the point of this life? Does this life have any ultimate purpose? Life can be interesting if you take in like bits and pieces. But if you take the totality of life, the basic template of life just seems pretty boring in some ways. It's the details that vary. I mean, just look at the human life, for instance. We are born somewhere, we have a childhood, and when we different opportunities for education, then we grow up, then we eventually start a career, and in career we have some successes, some failures, some good experiences, some bad experiences. We make a lot of friends, we have some detractors, and we start a family, then we have children, the children grow up, we grow older, eventually we might go to some nursing home, and then one day we die. Not a very poetic way of describing human life, but these are the basic facts of life. Now, you just fill in different details, and that's essentially what a human life is. So then one begins to ask, is that it? That we just come out of nowhere in this world, nobody seems to have asked us our choice, and then we kind of go through this whole thing, and then at an unknown time, in an unknown, unspecified time, unspecified way, one day we just disappear and nobody knows where. There are lots of theories, there are lots of books, there are lots of theologies saying from where we come and where we go. Depends on our faith, depends on our way of thinking, but one begins to question. Now, not everybody does. Most people are too engaged in their immediate what's going to happen tomorrow or next month or in November, for instance. But there is a life beyond that. And so these are the kind of questions that come to our mind when we begin to look deeply. Now, as I said, not everyone asks that question, because many of these questions don't have an immediate answer, or at any rate, an answer that is very comforting. Sometimes some of these questions raise possibilities that we don't even want to think about. And therefore, even if some people begin, I've known people who somehow got rid of some book of Vedanta. They start reading it and, oh, this is all may not be real. There is something beyond. They say, okay. Then after a few days, reading a few pages, they just keep it aside and say, well, this is not for me now. Or maybe when I have more time later on in life, I can try to think about it. Even to handle such ultimate questions about life, there has to be some basic fitness inside. We have to be strong enough. It needs courage. It needs strength. There was one Upanishadic passage Swami Vivekananda was very fond of repeating. He would say, Nayam Atma Balahinena Labhyaha. This Atman, this truth, cannot be reached by weak people. So he's emphasized strength. And it's not just the strength that we get by going to a gym. Yes, going to a gym is good. Running is good. It can build our muscles and make our body strong. And that strength can be useful. But a greater requirement is the inner strength. Another phrase of Swami Vivekananda was, muscles of iron and nerves of steel. So muscles of iron, yes. Do some bodybuilding, go to a gym, muscles of iron, possible. What about nerves of steel? Nerves of steel cannot be got in any gym. That comes from that inner life, strengthening of the inner life. And that is where dharma comes in. Living with honesty, living with truthfulness, living with some values and principles. That's what makes us strong inside. And only when we become strong through these values and principles, then we are in a better position to handle these questions, which are not very comforting. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking, oh, I need to be religious because I need some comfort in life. And yes, maybe, at least in the initial, a sort of superficial forays into religious life, it can bring comfort, no doubt about it. But if someone wants to go real deep, then one must be prepared, not for a comfortable religion, but something that makes us a little bit, kind of moves us out of our comfort zone, because it makes us think about things we may not have thought before, makes us ask questions we may not have asked before. And that's not a very comforting thing. So if we are looking for peace immediately after becoming spiritual, we have come to a wrong place. Actually, we don't need religion per se just for peace. Leading a strong moral, ethical life is often enough to experience deep peace inside. So it's not for peace that we turn to God or to religion. Where we turn to religion and spirituality is to know the truth. And if we have become complacent in our present understanding of reality and truth, then any change in that way of thinking is going to kind of take us out of our comfort zone. And that's why there are people who are always going to remain happy in their shallow life, if you like. But if we want to go deeper, then we have to, again, to go deeper, we have to look deeper and realize the value of going deeper as well. So what are the things we needed to look deeply, to practice discernment? There are primarily just 3 steps. First is just quieting the mind. We know that when we make a decision and the mind is calm, at peace, and quiet, we are better able to judge what's what. But if we are already disturbed, taking important decisions in life in a disturbed state of mind is a bad idea. First thing we need to do is to quiet out. Sometimes we might see that on the days you have had a really deep prayer, every day may not be that exactly in the same way, but there are times when prayer and meditation, we really feel a deep inner quiet, a deep inner peace. And we feel, that's the day we feel, today I had good meditation, because somehow we touch a deep inner peace in the heart. Now, with practice, that kind of an inner quiet can be experienced more and more often in our daily practice of prayer, japa, and meditation. It's also possible that we can kind of summon that inner quiet, especially at times in life when we really need to think deeply, when we have to choose something, when we have to decide something. Even if you are go to a mall and you're buying something and you're suddenly deciding, should I get this or should I get that? And if it's an expensive buy, then you somehow need to just quiet yourself a little bit in order to make the right choice. But after quieting, there's another one hurdle within us, and that is, can we back off from some of the existing biases and prejudices that we have? And these are inborn. There's nothing bad or wrong about it. There are some things, some people, some brands, and something we just either like or dislike strongly. So strong likes and dislikes about certain things can become a hurdle in making a right choice. And so as far as it is, or as much as it is humanly possible, if we can find a way to say as neutral as possible before making any decision. And the third thing, of course, is after quieting ourselves, after being as neutral as we can, looking at the options before us, and then we discern and say, this is the right thing, this is the good thing, this is healthy, this is something good for me. That's what we need to do. So that's the way of practicing viveka. Now, what they discovered in ancient times, and we don't know the time, of course, because the people have tried to put a date on the wisdom that has come to us today, what we see as Vedanta, or the wisdom in the Upanishads. But it's very difficult to put a timeline there, because for generations, this teaching was passed orally. And so there isn't any physical evidence to determine exactly when these books were written. But at some point, they found that which is infinite is pure, perfect, and that which is infinite is immortal. And then they asked us to look in our heart and say, what is going on here that we look at ourselves and find clearly there is the physical body that we have, but that's changing all the time. It's not an unchanging reality. In every dimension, in weight and everything, the body is changing. But the mind is changing as well. The thoughts, emotions, feelings, memories, ideas, hopes that we have at different stages of life, they keep on changing, evolving. So, in spite of all these changes that are occurring in physically and psychologically in me, I still feel I'm the same person. There is something in my being that has remained unchanged. And the whole quest is to find what the nature of that unchanging thing is. And as I said, one thing they discovered was that that unchanging part of me is infinite. That unchanging part of me is birthless and deathless. That unchanging part of me is pure and perfect and free. Everything else that is changing here is bound. Everything else that is changing is mortal. That will end at some point. Same thing when we look out. So even when we use words like God, in Vedantic understanding, that would mean I look out at the world and I see things are changing all the time. But just as there is something unchanging in my heart, in spite of the changes in body and mind, that which is unchanging in the universe outside, call it by any name, but one name which is often used commonly is God. So God is the unchanging presence in this entire creation. And the spirit within is the unchanging presence in my own being. And the different philosophical schools in Vedanta are really about not asking who God is, but really asking what is the relationship between the unchanging here and the unchanging behind the universe. So those schools of thought which think that these two unchanging entities are forever separate and different, they are called the dualistic schools of thought. There are other schools which believe that the unchanging here in my heart and the unchanging behind the universe, they are related, they are connected. That the unchanging here, the spirit is a part of this infinite spirit. And then they are, in Vedanta, they call it the Vishishta Advaita, the qualified non-dualist school of thought. And then there is this other school of thought which says the unchanging out there and the unchanging in here, they are one and the same. They are not different. What makes them appear different are these coverings that we have. So because this unchanging seems to be covered in this enclosure and the unchanging there is infinite or covered by this creation, so to speak, if you take away the coverings of both these, the unchanging within is the same. And the example often given in Vedanta is about if you go to an ocean well, we have got a river right here. We don't even need to go to ocean. So if you go to a river and take different containers of different sizes and different shapes, and you fill those containers with the water of the river, then you look at those shapes of the water, then they will all be very different. They will take the shape of the container in which the water is put. And if it's a glass, I might say this is a glass water, this is a jar water, this is a bucket water. Now, they look different clearly, and they are named differently. But if I pour all that water back into the river, I won't be able to distinguish any of them. So that's one way they say that the water in this and the water in that are not different. The unchanging here and unchanging there is not different. And so if we apply that discernment, viveka, to our own being and look carefully here, we begin to see things that we had not noticed before. Now we might say, what's the point? Why should I even try doing this? The reason it's worth investing our time and energy discovering what is within me, looking deeply, applying discernment here is that it completely takes away all the stress, worry, problems, name a problem that we have in life, and it'll go away. Because this discovery of the Atman is, and this is not just something that is found only in books, we have seen it in the lives of those who we see today as enlightened beings, that it brings fearlessness. It fills the life with joy. It fills the life with freedom, perfection. Everything that we seek, consciously or unconsciously, we can get if we apply that discernment to look deeply at ourselves and look deeply at the world. And that's why, as I said, discernment is something that we all of us have been practicing, often unconsciously, right from the time we are born. But doing it consciously, doing it as a spiritual practice, it eventually takes us to discerning not just what should I have for my breakfast this morning, but whether what is really real and what is illusory. And because the practice of discernment can take me to that level of investigation, the books often define discernment or viveka in those terms. It's the ability to be able to distinguish that which is truly real from that which is only apparently real. Now, there are the great things. So just to give a few more examples about what are the kind of things that we may discover or which we may not have thought before if we apply discernment or viveka there. One of the first things we see is that all the joys and sorrows in our life, they are transient. Now, this is something, it's not like you need a lot of investigation for that, but it's something that we may not have given thought of before. Yes, we would love to be happy, but we know that happiness in our lives always comes punctuated by sorrow on both sides. In fact, we just go back and forth. It's like you play a game of tennis, then just like the ball goes from one court to the other and just being whacked back and forth. That's essentially how our life is. And that's nature in some way kind of plays with us. Nature gives us a blow and we sit and we cry and we weep. And then nature says, okay, and then kind of gives us a little bit of a rasagulla or a tiramisu or something. And say, this is good. And then we're rejoicing, we're happy. After some time, the nature comes and gives us a whack again, and then we cry again. We can look at our own life, irrespective of how old or young we are. We will see that there are moments of happiness, there are moments of sorrow. And we just go back and forth between them. The reason why all the joys that we get in life and all the sorrows that we get in life they are great, not the sorrows, but they are also limited. And they are limited because the cause is limited. All of our joys and sorrows are caused by something happening in the world around us. And no matter what is happening in the world around us, it is still limited. Some things are big, some things are small, but they are all limited. And because they are limited, the result they produce is also limited. And that's why we feel like repeating it. If ice cream makes me happy, as long as I'm eating the ice cream, as long as it is on my tongue, it can be bliss, absolute bliss. But if the bliss is only about 6 inches long, because once the ice cream passes this part, there is no more bliss. It's just hard work after that to digest all that. And if you want then that bliss to continue, then you need to take more ice cream. But then there is a limit to how much ice cream you can eat at a given time. Maybe if you take too much of it, then instead of joy, it can bring even more pain. That's how fragile joy and sorrow in life is. And that's why if we look deeply at the nature of joy and sorrow itself, we may come to the conclusion, this is what Viveka can do. We might come to the conclusion that we are fooling ourselves into thinking that there is joy and sorrow in life. There is sukha and dukkha in life. Essentially, there is just dukkha. There is a passage in the Mandukya Karika written by Gaudapada. It's on the Mandukya, one of the Upanishads, and it says in one place, Adau ante cha yan nasti madhya kalepi tat tatha, which simply means that which is not there in the beginning and not there in the end is probably not there in the middle also. And think about it this way. Why are we so easily able to brush off our dreams? Why you said dreams are not real? Because the dream world didn't exist before I go to sleep. The dream world doesn't exist after I wake up. So in the beginning it's not there, in the end it's not there. In the middle, it's probably not there, really there at all. So we can apply that same principle here, that before this joy came, I was miserable. There was all this sorrow, like, oh, I want this, I need this, I'm upset, I'm angry, and then an ice cream comes, and I'm happy. And after the ice cream, and they're like, oh, I wanted more, but it's gone, now what am I going to do? And so I was miserable before, I was miserable in the end, and this kind of a little bit of joy in the middle wasn't really a joy. That's the way of thinking. Now, it's not simply just a logical kind of play on words. Some of the greatest minds have come to that conclusion. One of the foundational observations that the Buddha made was life is suffering. He didn't say joy and sorrow. He just said it's suffering. Now that seems a very kind of a one-sided view of life. But then we look at Krishna. In the Gita, Krishna says, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajaswamam. Anityam, transient. Asukham, joyless. He could have said joy and sorrow, but he just said joyless. One other place in the Gita, Krishna refers to this entire existence as dukkhalayam, an abode of sorrow or suffering. Now, if these statements were made by some people who are themselves depressed and upset and angry forever, we probably would have just said, don't take it seriously. But when the Buddha says it, when Krishna says it, we need to say, no, well, let's let it, even if it wouldn't make sense right away, we need to just pause and say, let's look deeply. And that's exactly what they're saying. That a limited amount of joy is no joy at all. Because think about it this way, that if someone has been living in a deprived condition for a long time, that person has somehow gotten a little bit used to it. But in between, just for a day, you take this person and give this person all the great joys and facilities, and next day send this person back into that deprived condition, that person is going to be more miserable. Just by the memory of that wonderful time I had yesterday, and now I'm back. So even the joy, it's very difficult to hold on to. And so these people have come to the conclusion that, so this kind of a sorrow that Krishna and Buddha refer to, I sometimes like to refer to it as simply existential sorrow. Not in some kind of a very big philosophical sense, very literally. Sorrow associated with our very existence as living beings. Now, why are we living beings? What makes us who we are? Well, our body and mind. And as I'm fond of saying, no matter how much organic food we eat, no matter how much exercise we take, the body will fall ill sooner or later. It's impossible to separate the body from illness and disease. That's just the way the body is. It's not a perfect machine. It's a great machine, not a perfect one. And so sorrow associated with physical illness is there. It can't be wished away. And of course, there is the reality of death as well. Mind, there's so much stress, anxiety, worry. It's become so much a part of our life. It's so much a default condition that I have had some 3 or 4 times some people come and say, is something wrong with me? I just don't feel any stress at all. And the reason is we feel being stressed, low level or high level stress is such a normal condition that on some occasional time when we don't feel any stress at all, one begins to wonder at one's sanity. So that's the nature of the body and mind. And therefore, living in this kind of an imperfect body and mind all through our lives and not wanting to get out of it itself is a great sorrow. Now, if all this sounds extremely depressing, let me tell you, alongside this existential sorrow, there is an existential joy. That just as we cannot separate suffering from body and mind, we cannot separate joy from the spirit. We cannot separate joy from the Atman. Because the Atman, there is nothing to limit the spirit. It's infinite. And that which is infinite alone has the real joy or bliss connected with it. So the question with us is actually, that's where our choice comes in. Where do I want to park myself, if you like? And something I had mentioned, I think, long back was this, that suppose you go to, say, an event. Let's say you go to Fenway to watch a game. But then you have to park your car somewhere. And then maybe you find some garage and you park your car there. You park your car there. and then while you are at the game, during the game, you suddenly hear that there is a fire somewhere, that some garage is on fire. And then, of course, you're worried because you parked your car in a garage. And then you frantically say, oh, and then you kind of search, and then you find, oh, it's not the garage where I parked my car. It's a different garage. And then you feel safe. But if it's the same garage where you parked your car, then of course, then you are affected by it. So this is a kind of a very silly example in some ways, that we are affected when wherever we are parked, that place is in danger in somehow. Now, what the Vedanta teachers point out, that we have parked our being in the body and mind. And what does parking in our body and mind mean? Looking upon the body and me and mind as me. This is me. So I have parked myself in the body and mind, so whatever happens to the body or mind seems to be happening to me. Because my car, I'm parked there. Now, you can say that in the state of deep sleep, you're not conscious of the fact of your body or the mind. You're kind of not parked there because you're not even conscious of it. You're not even thinking about it. You don't even feel it's there. And therefore, whatever happens to the body and mind, you're not affected in deep sleep. But wake up in the morning, say, this is me, this mind is mine, I have these worries, these tension, these worries, everything because I'm parked there. Now, what prayer and meditation help us do is to kind of help us move our car from the body-mind garage, it sounds so odd, to the Atman garage, like the spirit garage. And that garage is the safest because nothing can happen there. It's infinite. It's all that exists really. There is no danger, nothing can happen to it. And so therefore, this perishable world and everything in it, including our body and mind, can produce only sorrow, dukkham. If I look deeply at my existence, discover that there is a deeper, unchanging, infinite reality here, and consciously then take the decision to move my awareness from the body and mind, my identity with the body and mind, to the spirit, that is where I can begin to experience great joy. Holy Mother Sharda Devi said that every time she saw Sri Ramakrishna, she said, the day I met him, I felt as if my heart is filled with that bliss, filled with that joy. That's the joy you see in Ramakrishna's face in that lovely picture of his when he's standing in samadhi. Now, that is what discernment can help us do. It can help us distinguish between a real source of joy and this kind of an ephemeral, illusory joy that we are busy with most of the time. And one other kind of a thing, I won't go too much into this, that if this world has its tensions and world is not a very satisfactory place, it's filled with joy and sorrow as we saw, applying discernment to whatever other worlds we might think of or believe in, and oftentimes in the afterworld, people in very generic term, we think about the heaven and hell. Hell is a terrible place, heaven is a wonderful place, and we have these kind of distinctions. What Viveka will help us do, what discernment will help us do, is even look deeply at the places we call as heaven and look at all the different stories, all the different imaginations, all the different ways of thinking, irrespective, throughout history, in different traditions. And we find that heaven definitely seems to be better than hell, but is it a place of unalloyed joy, or aren't there tensions there? And we see through mythology, whether it's we think about the story of Lucifer, who didn't want to be under God, wanted to challenge and then was cast into hell. So there were these kind of power struggles there. In Hindu mythology, there's of course constantly wars going on between the Devas and the Rakshasas. Again, a warlike situation is not a very happy thing. You're not something that you would want to be a part of. There is also, in Indian mythology, there is a celestial physician. It's called Dhanvantari. And you say, why would you want a physician in heaven unless people fell ill there or sick there? So through myths and stories, we see that not even heaven is not a very perfect place. Discernment will then say, that may not be the goal I want to go to. Because, again, through discernment, we will see that if the cause is limited, the effect will be limited also. No matter how good I am, no matter how good the amount of good I may have done in this world, it's still a limited entity. So how can the limited amount of good that I have done give me an everlasting joy? That will also give me maybe a much longer joy, but still limited. And that's how then this whole idea of karma and then the rebirth is, yes, I'm rewarded for the good thing that I do, but the reward also being limited. Afterwards, I have to kind of repeat the whole cycle again. And so discernment will say, going to this place or that place may not be the ultimate goal. The goal would be to kind of find a state of being which is free from any sorrow, free from any bondage. And that state of being can come only through the unlimited, only through the infinite. And that's why the discernment comes at the very first of the 4 practices. The second practice, which we will do later on, is of course what is called detachment. The idea is simple, that if I'm able to look deeply at something and then able to see this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is healthy, this is unhealthy, then the next step is I should attach myself to what is good, attach myself to what is healthy, and detach myself from whatever is not good. And so detachment is a very natural follow-up practice to discernment. And we will see the challenges there. Sometimes we may know something is bad, and yet we may not be able to detach ourselves from it. Sometimes if someone has high sugar and the doctor says, no more sweets. So I look at the sweet, I know it's bad. My discernment tells me it's not good, but I cannot detach myself from it. And so detachment would be the second of these 4 practices, which we will take up at some unspecified time in the future, not too long after. We'll take a look at that. And so finally, as many of you who have been attending the Wednesday class know, the text that we are studying now is called Viveka Chudamani. Chuda is the crest, and Mani is a jewel. And so discernment, Viveka, is often called the crest jewel. It's one of the most important practices in Vedanta. The Vedanta practice begins with discernment. And as I sometimes say, that it may not have been completely accidental that one of the best commentators and teachers of Vedanta in the times, more contemporary times, is still about more than 100 years ago, but still closer to us in time, was named Vivekananda, the joy of discernment. So I would encourage you to give some thought to discernment and see how much time we give in our own lives whenever we are called upon to make choices, how carefully we look at things, how carefully we make decisions, how often we end up making wrong decisions, and why do those decisions go wrong. So looking at our own lives and even trying to look deeply, carefully at everything, even not just choices, looking deeply, carefully at people around us, everything around us. So just if we make it a habit to look deeply and carefully, there are enormous rewards at the end of it. We'll stand to gain so much. Ultimately, of course, we can gain the highest in life. So I end with a prayer that the infinite grace of the divine being, may that spirit of discernment awaken in our heart and guide us in our life's journey. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhum.